Hey, so I'm the kind of person who avoids crowds, dreads phone calls, and really avoids any social interaction. And like in every world's definition, I am an introvert. So the idea of business where you have to do like cold calls or like networking events, it was honestly a nightmare for me. And like every time that I searched up how to do business, everyone was telling me that I need to be loud in business, that I need to have this persona online or to be this influencer type, right? And honestly, that terrified me because I'm not any of those things. But last year, at just 19 years old, I was still able to build my business to six figures without being an extrovert or without forcing myself to be an extrovert. And honestly, I don't think I would have succeeded if I tried to fake being an extrovert. Instead, being an introvert actually made me this successful. Now, when we think of an entrepreneur, especially if you're new to business, you'll think of this guy in like the Wolf of Wall Street, right? You'll think of this guy closing deals 24/7, talking to people 24/7, and always being on the grind, right? And honestly, like that's not the case for everyone. That's only the case for like half of people because there are other people in the back end who are actually making more money than the people who are talking more. And so like people are used to believing that in order to be the successful entrepreneur, that you have to be this hustle bro, right? Or you have to be this extrovert type. But what ends up happening is they just end up ruining their business because well, if you try to be that guy who talks to everyone even though you're not an extrovert, well then you're gonna ruin your business, right? And then I tried to do that for my own too. Like I tried to force extrovertism or like I don't know, is that a word? Yeah, I tried to force that thing into my business before, and like what ended up happening is I started to become this fake persona that I didn't really like. Like I would post tweets that are out of the norm for me, that are like out of my personality. I would talk to people in a way that didn't seem natural. And in general, I acted like in a way that didn't feel authentic at all, right? And so like some days, I would be stoked to do it. And sometimes I wouldn't be stoked to do it because like it was like putting on a mask. And even though I tried to put that mask on several times, it didn't really work out for me because at the end of the day, I'm still an introvert. And no amount of like forcing myself can actually make me an extrovert, right? So it didn't work out. And so like the pressure to be an extrovert is a trap. Whenever you try to build businesses, know that this thing right here, if you try to be an extrovert, it's only going to ruin you more than help you. Like it's a pressure to act perfect in business. But like there are so many definitions of perfect in business, like I know some people who are more socially awkward than me, but are making like 10 times more than me. They're making like $1 million a month. It's really crucial to understand that if you want to make it in business, you don't have to be an extrovert. There are a few things that you can change if you're an introvert to actually leverage being an introvert because you don't want your weaknesses to be against you, right? You want them to be helping you. So here are the traits that actually make up a successful introvert. Because like when you grew up, probably, everyone told you that leaders are meant to be loud, or that, if you're an extrovert, you are more likely to be a leader, or that introverts aren't going to be as successful as extroverts because they can talk to people. Well, that is kind of all wrong. So remove all of your past beliefs about like how to be successful as an introvert, and remember like try to rewire your brain as I say all of these new traits. And so like the first thing is that introverts are a deep thinker and not a deep speaker, right? And what I mean by that is that extroverts, they tend to think by speaking their thoughts out loud. But introverts, they tend to think by thinking. So they actually don't need to speak out their thoughts out loud to think. And so like when everyone notices introverts, they think they're automatically like less superior to the extroverts because well, they don't talk as much. But the reality is that introverts are still very much capable, and they just have a different way of processing information. And so like if you're an introvert and you find yourself not talking too much, then that's not actually a bad thing. Maybe you just like thinking of things more before you actually put out your word. And that's way more important rather than just like saying some half-assed stuff. So, leverage that skill if you're a deep thinker, and do not like try to conceal it because it's one of your best superpowers as an introvert. And the second thing is kind of similar to the first one, but it's that you are a great listener and not a great broadcaster. Now, when it comes to building a business online, this can be one of the best things because like if you talk a lot in sales, for example, you will most likely lose the deal, right? Like if you talk more than the prospect, then you're trying to convince them, which isn't a good way to go about sales. The best sales strategy is always to make the prospect convince themselves. And so like if you listen more and really listen to the prospect's problems and only asking them questions like, oh, what made you say that, man? Or like, what would happen if this didn't change in the next 6 months? Those are the questions that really force someone to buy, right? And it's a really good trait in business, you know. And I've actually found that extroverts sometimes miss out on this skill. Like, I have clients who are extroverts and they mess up their words, I mean, their sales sometimes simply by talking too much, right? And by all means, you should talk in sales. Like, talking is a good skill in sales. But the majority of the time, you should learn how to shut up and know when to talk at the right times. And then the third thing is I've noticed that a lot of introverts, they actually like writing. So they prefer writing more than recording videos like this, for example. And that can be a good thing and a bad thing. It can be a bad thing if whatever you're doing right now requires you to do videos. But if you're on X, for example, like I am, then this thing can actually be a superpower because like X, for example, it's a text-based platform. And everywhere there you use text to actually communicate to people and like post content. So like it can be a skill because everything that you do online, the foundations of it are all writing. So like think a lead magnet, think a book, think an offer, you know, all of those things, they all start with the writing. And so that introverts have this innate ability to get things started, right? Whereas extroverts, they kind of need to think about it a lot. They need to like talk about it a lot, maybe talk to their partner about it. But introverts, you know, they just kind of start because, well, the best way to start for us introverts is just writing things down. And so, like, I firmly believe that writing is a really great skill that a lot of introverts are blessed with. You know, I've met so many introverts, and a lot of them are also, you know, by chance, good writers. So, if you find yourself to be adequately good at writing or like even more than average, then you know, you should probably leverage that skill. There are so many things that you can do with writing. You know, you can make content, you can write books, you can do all of these things. And all of those things that I just mentioned, you can go ahead and monetize those skills, you know. So if you are a good writer and you're an introvert, you should probably lean into that because it's a rare trait that not a lot of people lean into. And the last thing is kind of like my thing, which is that instead of us wanting a huge audience and being this influencer type, we only want a small audience with a handful of people, right? And this, you know, obviously, if you have a bigger audience, that means more people that can buy your stuff. But at the same time, you know, introverts, they are really good at mastering close connections, or in other words, they are really good at building a fan base that really support them. You know, like for example, I have 5,000 followers on my X account, but I was able to turn those 5,000 followers into $120,000 cash collected in just 1 year. And so like that means for every one follower, I have collected at least $24. And so if you think about it, if you want to make a lot of money online, you don't really need to have a huge following, right? Sure, it's a good thing. And sure, more followers, you know, it probably means more money. But if you can build your business the right way and attract your ideal audience, then you don't need a big following. Similar to what I did. You know, like I can post these videos online. They would get like 200 views or like 1,000 views even sometimes, right? But I was still able to make this amount of money with just this small audience, right? Like you don't need much to be honest with you. Now, those are the five traits, but obviously knowing your strengths is just one thing. You know, you still have to build the business at the end of the day. And so like when extroverts build their business, they think of their business as like this one thing that they have to always be around on. So like they have to host workshops, they have to host live speaking events, they have to host like podcasts, you know, stuff like that. But as an introvert, you can actually build your business in a different way. And this is how I've mostly built my business around on. And it's called the concept of being asynchronous rather than synchronous. So to define the terms, synchronous means being with the client one-on-one as much as possible. Being asynchronous means still talking to the client but just not on call. Because personally, you know that feeling where you have a scheduled phone call or you have a scheduled meeting and then the rest of your morning starts to not be productive leading up to that call, you know? personally, that's what happens to me. Like if I know I have to talk to someone at this particular time, I would spend the remaining few hours before that time stressing out about it or like preparing for the call, right? It's just a natural thing that introverts like me are born with, right? It's not a good trait. But like at the end of the day, we don't have to be ruined by it. And so like if you want to build your business asynchronously, here's what you can do. Like instead of having calls for every single person, you can only have calls for the people that are qualified. So like you can hard qualify people before even the call. Like don't talk to everyone. And like in general, if you focus your business to be asynchronous, then a lot of your energy will be focused on the actual creation of the business itself. So that means like writing, making offers, testing out new strategies, things that happen in the back end, which as we all know are the biggest money generators of any business out there. And so, like, if you find yourself to constantly lose energy when talking to people, then you can simply model your business to be asynchronous, right? And I have a video up here talking about how to build a business like Batman, which is basically like, Superman. He tries to be the guy who saves everyone, who does everything and talks to everyone. But Batman, he only saves those who need saving, right? So he's more like an asynchronous guy. He focuses more on systems rather than just like brute strength like Superman. And so if you're interested in that, you can go ahead and watch this video. But anyways, guys, so this is the video today. If you are an introvert or if you're an extrovert, hell, I don't know if you're watching this, if you're an extrovert, then, you really just have to leverage your skills in business. Like there are so many ways to go about business. I'm going to be 100% honest. They probably are all 100% right. But you have to use but you have to use what makes most sense to you. Like if you're an extrovert, don't try to do introvert things. If you're an introvert, then don't try to do extrovert things, right? So yeah, that is it for me to guys today. Again, if you want to watch the Batman video, then you can just click the link up here or in the description. But yeah, talk to you guys soon.